Okay, so welcome everyone to another lightning talk. My name's Nathan and I'm the principal software engineer here at Oxil Information Labs. And today I'll be talking about how we create software at Oxil Information Labs along with the techniques that we follow for building these. So going straight into it, what is it we do? Well, quite simply, we build software that runs on web servers. Specifically, we deploy these to the cloud, and these take the form of a typical website. Coupled with those, front-facing websites are more advanced applications that provide customized functionality for our users and customers. These are protected through a security layer, which requires authentication before access can be granted. And together, these are known as the front end of the system. In order for these to work properly and fully operate, they in turn will need to communicate with a server and access a database if necessary to return any data to them. And these together, the server and the database, are often referred to as the back end of the system. Most of my time as a developer here at Oxil is spent between the application and the server layer, is where I spend most of my time. But today's talk is going to focus specifically on the application itself and how we do that. So we create front-facing websites. These also offer advanced application functionality, and websites that offer application type interface and functionality are often referred to as web applications, and they run in any modern mobile or desktop browser. And unlike traditional computer programs, they don't require to be downloaded to your system. You can just simply run them in the browser. So web apps in general, what are they capable of doing? Well, they'll need to be able to connect to a database in order to let people log in, to sign up, and to provide interactive workflow and a customizable experience for the end user. They'll need to store data, and this can be done locally on the device or the browser that you're using, and also remotely on the connected server. They can also provide interaction with the devices you're using. So you can obviously access the keyboard and mouse, but you also have access to other things such as Bluetooth devices, web cameras, speakers, microphones. And they're also able to receive push notifications. So if you want to notify your users of changes to the site or the app, you can notify them instantly with notifications. And this is something that's possible on desktop browsers now, along with mobile web apps. So an example of some web apps that you'll all be familiar with, Google Webmail is their web application that allows you to log in to manage your email account. You can view and edit and compose emails. Twitter, social media platform that allows you to communicate with others and also to receive notifications. And one that we've been that we've had a hand in creating is netistral.com for buying domain names and managing all aspects of that domain name. So there are different types of web apps, different ways that you can create them, different technologies and methods that you can use. One of those is to create what's often referred to as a dynamic web app. And what this is each time you navigate around the site, the page reloads, which asks the server for the content of the page. It will ask the database for any data. And this is all done on the server side. And this will rely on server-side languages such as PHP or ASP.NET in order to get the content ready for the browser. Another way of doing it would be a multi-page web app, which is similar to dynamic, but the pages are loaded from the server, but they don't need to be processed on the server. It can just simply return the HTML for the browser to load and interpret. And the last way of doing things is that I'm going to cover today anyway, is this idea of a single page web app, which has become quite popular recently. And this is very different to the other two that I've mentioned. A single HTML page is loaded from the server when you first visit the site, and all the content for the site is loaded up front. So as you're navigating around, there's no need to go back to the server for any more content. And these rely heavily on JavaScript to make this possible. So let's, in practice, see how this actually works and how they compare and contrast. So in the case of a dynamic web app, you would go to your mywebapp.com website. It would make a request to the application server, which would then process that request, access the database, and once it's finished processing, return the response to the browser, and your web page would load with all the data necessary for you to carry on and work as you want to. Let's say, for example, then you want to navigate and view your order history. You would head over to the orders page, and the same thing would happen. The page would reload, it would send a request, the data would be processed, the response would be sent back to the browser, and you would see all of the information that you requested. If we contrast that with a single page application, when you navigate for the first time, it will send the request to, again, it could be a traditional server, or it could be a simple file server that will return the HTML for that page and the whole site. And then you can go ahead and access the data via a simple data request, and the page will be populated. Navigating to the orders page will be quite different, and you'll see this. If we navigate to the orders page now, that page is loaded instantly. There's no need to go to the server to get anything from it to load the site itself. The pages load very quickly, there's no reloads, and the data between these pages can be shared if you need to. So the next thing to do here would be to ask the server for the data, and the content would be populated. So you can see how different the different techniques of creating web apps and the benefits that you can have from those. So there are some benefits to having a dynamic or multi-page web app, and it's often better suited where SEO is important because each page is loaded individually. But this is not really much of an issue anymore because of some advancements that have been made to single page applications, which I'll explain later on. It's often easier to scale up these types of apps because each page is loaded up one at a time rather than all up front. There really isn't a limit to the number of pages you can have. It's easier to gain insights into each page's analytics. So things like time on page or page views, again, is often easier to achieve if that's important to you in this dynamic model. But there are some things you need to consider, is that it will be more time consuming to maintain. You have to not only maintain and manage the web app itself, but also the software on the server that's sending back and processing the content for each page. And because of the fact that each page has to be loaded from the server, there'll be an increased cost because of the amount of requests go into the server, and you have to make sure that your server is able to handle all of those requests at busy times and peak times. So single page apps, we know they're a lot faster to load. In fact, just going back on that, I previously mentioned about this idea that it's easier for dynamics to be slightly larger in size because of the nature that they load things. There is a concept in single page applications where you can lazy load content. So you don't always have to load everything up front the first time you visit. You may only do that for your frequently visited pages or your most popular pages. And those pages that don't get visited, that get visited less often, you can have those be returned at a later date. Because these apps, all the content can be loaded up front, it is possible for them to work offline. You don't always need an internet connection for these to work, and that will depend on how you access the data for that app. But like I said, it is possible for these to work offline without an internet connection. It can be easier for code to be reusable within these types of applications, because you could share the the cores that are necessary to request data between the web app, and you could use those in, if you were going to build an iOS or an Android app, you could use those same requests for data, so you could share those. I mentioned earlier about SEO, and this really has to do with how Google is able to search your site for content. And with a single page application, all of the content being loaded in JavaScript, that is pretty much impossible for Google to scrape and crawl. But Google have recently introduced new tools to make this possible. And there are different techniques that you can apply that, if SEO is important for your web app, for it to be ranked and to be available to search engines, it is now possible. So this is less of an issue, but it will require a bit more work to make that happen. One problem is that single page apps can be prone to something called a cross-site scripting attack, which basically means that malicious scripts can be injected by hackers into the application. Now that sounds quite scary and quite dangerous, but this can be easily overcome by simply adhering to strict coding standards and making use of things such as content security policies to prevent any unknown scripts from being run on your site. So how do we approach building apps at Oxil? Well, we go for the single page application approach, but over the years, we've built apps using both dynamic and multi-page methods. But as a company, we evaluate the best approach for each project we undertake and the best tools for the job. And at this moment in time, we feel strongly about using the single page application approach. To do this, we use open source JavaScript frameworks. And open source simply means that it's software that's been released by the developer that's freely available for others to use or modify as they see fit. And a JavaScript framework is a collection of libraries or resources that provide the structure necessary to build these applications. And the framework in particular that we use to do this is one called Angular, which has been developed by Google. And it provides a complete package that enables us to rapidly build and prototype our web applications for our clients. So why did we choose Angular? Well, it has excellent support for two-way binding. And what two-way binding means is that you can easily keep the values between your model or your JavaScript variables and your view, your HTML content, in sync with each other. So if you change a variable in the site, say you're changing a text field, that can stay in sync with the variable that you've defined in JavaScript. It has a very robust routing and navigation built into it. And that might seem quite silly, but you have to remember that a single page application, there are no page reloads. So the navigation is kind of a fake navigation, but Angular provides this navigation built in so that it feels like a natural flow. But what's happening under the covers is HTML is being loaded and unloaded. There's no actual page reload and refreshing happening. They provide secure page level guards, and these prevent people from accessing certain types of content or certain pages based on criteria. So for example, if you had some content that was only allowed to be accessed by people who are logged in, you could have a guard that prevents people who are not logged in from accessing it. And we really like Angular because of the way that you can structure your files. You can separate out your HTML from your JavaScript and from your CSS. And that's an approach that we like. So let's have a very brief introduction to Angular. I won't go into any great detail. That can be a whole lightning talk on its own, how Angular actually works. But I just want to give you a brief demonstration of how this two-way binding works, so you can see what it is and why that's important. So on the left, you can see we have our file. We have a file for our CSS. We have a file for our HTML content. we have a JavaScript file, and this module is the configuration module for Angular. So we won't worry about that. In our HTML, we've simply entered hello world. And in our JavaScript file, we have two variables. We have a name and an address. And let's say in our application, we wanted to display the name and address. That can be done very easily and very simply by using this bracketed syntax and the name of the variable inside. So if I wanted to print what my name was, it's as simple as that. And to print the address, it would be as simple as that. So in summary, at Oxil, we use the single page application approach for developing our web apps. This provides the users of our systems with fast responsive application load times. And we utilize open source frameworks, specifically AngularJS, but we also contribute to the open source idea by creating our own components and libraries for others to use. And that concludes this short introduction to our application development here at Oxil. Thank you for watching.